Hotel kicks out the black man, not realizing he's their boss. They had no idea who they were dealing with, and one mistake would alter their lives forever. When a wealthy entrepreneur is ejected from an upscale hotel solely because of his race, they don't realize that by the next day, they'll be facing him in a completely different setting. Now, he's in control, and they'll soon understand the real price of their prejudice. But before we dive into what happens next, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below. Owen Williams stepped out of his car, inhaling the crisp Swiss air as it brushed against his skin. He gazed up at the majestic exterior of the luxury hotel, its immaculate facade gleaming in the midday sun. This was where his crucial business meeting was scheduled, a meeting that had the potential to shape his future. As a highly successful businessman, Owen had long been familiar with navigating the world of the wealthy and elite, but he was also used to the silent judgments that often followed him. Today, however, an unusual sense of discomfort settled in his gut as he entered the hotel lobby. His sharp eye immediately caught the cold glances from both staff and guests. It wasn't the first time he'd encountered such reactions, but there was something more unsettling here, an underlying hostility he couldn't quite place. Straightening his tie and walking with a steady confidence, Owen approached the reception desk. The receptionist, a young woman with a polished smile, looked up at him. Her expression shifted slightly as she took in his presence, her gaze lingering for a split second too long. She tried to maintain a friendly facade, but Owen noticed the subtle unease behind her smile. "Good afternoon. How may I assist you?" she asked, her tone neutral but tinged with a distant formality. "Good afternoon," Owen responded politely. "I have a reservation under the name Owen Williams. I'm here for a business meeting." The receptionist's smile faltered, and she quickly began typing into the computer, her eyes flicking nervously between the screen and Owen. He could sense her uncertainty, and it confirmed his suspicion that something was wrong. After a few moments, she looked up, still forcing a smile, but there was tension in her expression. "I'm sorry, sir, but there seems to be an issue," she said hesitantly. "Are you sure this is the right hotel?" Owen kept his composure, though frustration simmered beneath the surface. "Yes, I'm certain. This is the Grand Alpine Hotel, correct?" he asked, his tone polite but firm. Before she could answer, a man in a tailored suit approached. He was the hotel manager, Mr. Laurent, and his authoritative demeanor was evident, though tinged with arrogance. He cast a dismissive glance at Owen before addressing the receptionist. "Is there a problem?" Laurent asked, his voice dripping with practiced politeness that barely masked his disdain. The receptionist hesitated, unsure how to proceed. "This gentleman claims to have a reservation, but I can't find it in our system," she explained quietly, shooting Owen a nervous look. Laurent nodded, narrowing his eyes slightly as he turned toward Owen. "I'm afraid we have no record of your reservation, sir. Are you certain you booked here?" His tone was patronizing, as if speaking to someone who clearly didn't belong. Remaining calm but increasingly irritated, Owen replied, "Yes, I'm positive. I can show you the confirmation email if necessary." Laurent offered a thin, insincere smile. "That won't be necessary," he said dismissively. "However, we have certain standards here, and if you don't have a confirmed booking, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The tension in the lobby thickened. Owen could feel the weight of countless eyes on him, silent judgments and assumptions made purely based on his race and presence in this elite environment. He knew the situation all too well. "I have a confirmed reservation," Owen reiterated, his voice firm but controlled. "I'm here for an important meeting. Please check again." Laurent's expression hardened, and he glanced over at the security guard standing nearby. "Gentlemen," he called out in a commanding tone, "escort this man out. He seems to be mistaken." The guards approached, their hands hovering over their radios. Owen's heart raced, but he had no intention of backing down. As he reached into his pocket to retrieve his phone and show proof of his booking, the guards misinterpreted his movement. "Hands where I can see them!" one of the guards barked, his voice echoing through the lobby. The room fell silent, and the guests turned to watch the escalating confrontation. The atmosphere in the hotel lobby grew taut with tension. Owen froze, his hand halfway into his pocket, his mind racing to process the situation. He could see the fear and suspicion in the eyes of the security guards, ready to react at the slightest hint of a wrong move. The hum of chatter had ceased, and now all eyes were on him, a black man being treated as a threat in an upscale Swiss hotel, where prejudice clung to the air like a heavy fog. The guard's command had left him little room for error. Slowly, deliberately, Owen raised his hands, palms open, showing he meant no harm. His voice was calm, though inside his blood boiled. "I'm just reaching for my phone to show you the confirmation," he said evenly, his gaze flicking between the security guards and Laurent, the hotel manager, whose smug expression hadn't wavered. "That's not necessary," Laurent replied, stepping closer, his voice dripping with authority. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave, sir. This is a private establishment, and if you can't prove your reservation on the spot, you don't belong here." The words sliced through Owen. He had been here before, perhaps not in this exact moment, but in others just like it, where his presence was questioned, where he was told he didn't belong. But today, it felt sharper, more personal, because he wasn't just some anonymous guest. He was Owen Williams, one of the most successful businessmen in Switzerland, and he had built his empire despite obstacles like this. He locked eyes with Laurent, his voice lowering into something more controlled, yet dangerous in its restraint. "I don't think you understand who you're speaking to," he said. "You're about to make a very costly mistake." Laurent's smirk didn't waver. "I think I understand perfectly," he replied with a condescension that made the hair on the back of Owen's neck rise. "Escort him out." The guards moved forward, their hands lightly touching their radios, and the room held its collective breath, waiting to see how Owen would respond. For a moment, it felt like the world had shrunk to just this moment, his dignity against their arrogance. But Owen didn't move. He stood tall, his chin lifted. "Touch me," he warned, "and you'll regret it." One of the guards hesitated, uncertain, but Laurent's cold, dismissive nod spurred them on. The first guard reached for Owen's arm, and before he could react, Owen's voice cut through the tension with icy precision. "Do it," Owen said, "and by tomorrow morning I'll own this hotel. Your jobs? Gone. Your reputation? Destroyed. All because you couldn't recognize the person standing in front of you." There was a flicker of doubt in the guard's eyes, and Laurent's confidence faltered for just a second. Owen knew the weight of his name. He hadn't wanted to play that card, but he'd been left no choice. His empire was built on moments like this, when the world underestimated him and he showed them just how wrong they were. "I suggest you call your owner," Owen said, his voice steady, filled with an authority that couldn't be ignored. "Because if I leave this building without the respect I deserve, it won't just be headlines tomorrow. It will be lawsuits, and trust me, I have more lawyers on retainer than you can imagine." For the first time, Laurent looked unsure. The gears in his head seemed to turn as he reevaluated the situation. "You think you can intimidate me?" he sneered, but there was less conviction in his words. Owen tilted his head, a cold smile touching his lips. "It's not intimidation, it's a warning. And trust me, I always follow through." At that moment, the unmistakable sound of a phone buzzing on Laurent's desk filled the room. His receptionist, looking flustered, picked up the call, and after a moment, her face went pale. She whispered something to Laurent, who leaned in to listen. His face drained of color as the voice on the other end barked instructions. Owen didn't need to hear the conversation to know what was happening. The hotel's owner, likely a man who knew Owen's influence in Switzerland's business elite, had heard what was going on, and he wasn't about to let a man like Laurent ruin his reputation. When Laurent straightened, the arrogance had melted away, replaced by something resembling panic. He cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "It appears there's been a misunderstanding," he began, his voice suddenly lacking the earlier edge. Owen watched him with steely eyes, not moving a muscle. "Please," Laurent stammered, "there's no need to escalate this further. We'll, of course, honor your reservation and—" Owen cut him off with a single raised hand. "It's too late for that," he said softly, but the menace in his tone was unmistakable. "I'm not staying, but trust me when I say this isn't over." He turned to the guards, who were now frozen in place, unsure of what to do. Without another word, Owen strode toward the exit, his back straight, his presence commanding the room. As he walked out the door, the guests who had been watching scattered like leaves in the wind, realizing they had just witnessed something far more significant than a simple misunderstanding. As Owen drove away from the hotel, his phone buzzed with a message. He glanced down, seeing the name of his personal assistant, Sophia. With a flick of his finger, the message appeared on his screen. "Everything is set, Mr. Williams. The documents for the acquisition were finalized this morning. The Grand Alpine Hotel is officially yours." A slow smile crept across Owen's face as he realized the perfect twist had just fallen into place. He was no stranger to business acquisitions, and this one had been in the works for months. The irony that these people had treated him like a trespasser in his own establishment was almost too rich. He turned his car around. Back at the hotel, Laurent and the staff were trying to recover from the spectacle, unaware that the real storm was yet to come. The atmosphere was tense, and the receptionist whispered nervously to Laurent, "Do you think he's really going to follow through with those threats?" Laurent scoffed, but inside he was rattled. He had heard of powerful businessmen who could ruin careers with a single phone call, but surely that man didn't have that kind of influence. His arrogance clung to him like armor, though it was quickly starting to crack. Just as Laurent was about to reassure his staff, the glass doors to the hotel swung open. Owen walked in, his presence immediately commanding attention. Every pair of eyes snapped toward him, including Laurent's. The smugness had vanished from the manager's face, replaced by something much closer to fear. "I thought you were leaving, Mr. Williams," Laurent said, attempting a strained smile. Owen's voice was calm, but the authority in his tone was undeniable. "There's something you need to understand, Laurent," he said, stepping closer. "This hotel? The one you just tried to throw me out of?" He paused for dramatic effect. "It belongs to me." Laurent blinked, momentarily stunned, as if he hadn't heard Owen correctly. I'm sorry. What?" Owen reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a sleek folder with the hotel's logo embossed on the front. He handed it to Laurent, whose hands were trembling as he opened it. Inside were the official papers of ownership, Owen's name boldly printed at the top. The color drained from Laurent's face as the realization hit him like a freight train. The man he had so arrogantly dismissed, the man he had tried to humiliate, was not only a wealthy businessman, but the very person who now controlled his future. "I bought this hotel this morning," Owen said evenly. "I had planned to quietly finalize the deal during my meeting, but thanks to your display of ignorance and prejudice, we're doing this on my terms." The room had gone deathly quiet. The receptionist, who had initially been complicit in the mistreatment, stood frozen behind the desk, her face pale with shock. Laurent stammered, "Mr. Williams, I had no idea. That's the problem, Laurent," Owen interrupted, his voice firm but calm. "You didn't care who I was because you couldn't see past your assumptions, but let me make something clear. Your actions have consequences." He turned to the security guards who had been quick to accost him earlier. "All of you," he said, his voice slicing through the silence, "are fired, effective immediately, and you'll never work in another hotel as long as I'm alive." Laurent's mouth opened and closed as if he was trying to form a response, but no words came. The gravity of the situation weighed on him, dragging him down from the false pedestal he had built for himself. The security guards exchanged nervous glances, realizing the gravity of their mistake. "But, please," Laurent finally choked out. "I didn't know." "I don't care," Owen said, his gaze unflinching. "You treated me like I didn't belong in a place I own. You disrespected me, and that's something I don't tolerate." He took a step closer, his eyes locking onto Laurent's. "You're finished." Laurent stumbled back, his entire world unraveling in front of him. "Please, Mr. Williams, there must be some way we can resolve this." Owen remained stone-faced. "You had your chance." As Owen turned to leave the hotel for the second time that day, he paused in the doorway. He glanced over his shoulder, his eyes sweeping over the staff, each one of them trembling in the wake of what had just happened. "Consider this a lesson," Owen said, his voice low but full of meaning. "Never judge someone by their appearance. You never know who they might turn out to be." And with that, Owen left, the heavy glass doors closing behind him with a soft thud. Inside the hotel, Laurent and his staff stood in stunned silence, knowing their careers were over, ruined by their own prejudice and arrogance. They had no one to blame but themselves. And Owen Williams? He walked away with his head held high, knowing he had not only won the battle, but ensured they would never forget the price of their prejudice. Leave a comment if you enjoyed this story. It doesn't cost you anything, and you'll make me very happy. Thank you, and I look forward to your like.